This is Tom Fox. I'm the Compliance Evangelist, and I'd like to welcome you to the September edition of my year-long podcast series on creating a more effective compliance program. Each month during this year, I'm focusing on a different topic which will help you create a more effective compliance program. And for the month of September, I'm going to focus on innovation in compliance. First, a word from this month's sponsor, Oversight Systems.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. Oversight's artificial intelligence platform takes a comprehensive, multidimensional approach to identifying anomalies that are suggestive of bribery and corruption. Our analytics look across various dimensions such as employees, attendees, vendors, and countries over an extended time period. This enables us to identify employees exhibiting patterns of potentially improper behavior or collusion that are difficult to detect by auditing a single transaction at a time. Based on the analysis, employees or vendors engaged in risky behavior are presented in a risk-ranked format for easy examination. Remediation activities and the underlying root causes are automatically documented to drive continuous improvement. Oversight clients can easily demonstrate to the board, and if ever necessary to the regulatory authorities, that proactive monitoring of business transactions for anti-bribery and corruption risk is an integral part of company operations. With Oversight's Insights on Demand, you can have a best practice approach to identify possible violations in travel and entertainment and procure-to-pay programs. For more information, visit us at oversightsystems.com.
Innovation indeed. I hope you will join me for the entire one-month series on innovation. I'm going to take a look at artificial intelligence, social media, leadership, and structural innovations. I think you will find it a fascinating month, and at the end of the month, you will have multiple tools and techniques which you can utilize to make your compliance program not only more effective, but operationalized, more efficient, and helping you to create greater profitability for your organization. This podcast, 1 Month to a Better Compliance Program, is a part of the Compliance Podcast Network. Day 11, the TheODA Feedback Loop. This is the podcast you've been waiting for, as I've referenced the TheODA feedback loop quite a bit in this 1 month of Innovation in Compliance series. Innovation can come in new ideas or simply fresh ways to consider old problems. The idea of how to use the information available to the CCO is one that can be explored through very different and multiple avenues. One of the most interesting original innovations originated in dogfights from World War II. These insights gained from the process around pilots and dogfights were instrumental in the U.S. Army's swift victory in the first Gulf War in 1991. All of this was detailed in a chapter in an ebook. The chapter was entitled Planning for Big Data, CIO's Handbook to the Changing Data Landscape. The chapter was authored by Alistair Kroll, entitled The Feedback Economy. Kroll believes that big data will allow innovation through the feedback economy. This is a step beyond the information economy because you're using the information that is generated and collected as a source of information to guide you going forward. Information itself is not your greatest advantage, but using that information to make your business more agile, more efficient, and more profitable certainly is. And once again, think to the example of compliance officers who've been in front of, or were in front of Wei Chin when she was at the Department of Justice. She had basically two questions. What's the data show, and how have you used that data going forward? Same concept here. Kroll draws on military theory to illustrate the concept of the feedback loop. It's the TheODA loop. I love that word, sorry. But it stands for Observe, Orient, Detect, and Act. And this comes from the military strategist John Boyd, who realized that combat consists of a series of observing your circumstances, orienting yourself to your enemy's way of thinking and your environment, and deciding upon a cause of action and then acting upon it. The success of the TheODA loop is in large part, in fact, because it is simply that, a loop, so that the results of earlier actions feed back into later, hopefully more wise actions. This should allow combatants to get inside their opponent's loop, outsmarting and outmaneuvering them, because the system itself learns. For the Chief Compliance Officer, this means that if your company can collect and analyze information better, you can act on that information faster. Kroll believes one of the greatest impediments to using the OODA feedback loop is the surplus of noise in our data. That is, we need to capture and analyze it, separating the digital wheat from the digital chaff, identifying meaningful undercurrents while ignoring meaningless flotsam. To do this, you need to move through the robust system to put data in a more usable format. So you have to collect, analyze, and act on the data. The first step is data collection, where the challenge is both the sheer amount of data coming in and its size. Once data comes in, it must be ingested and cleaned. If it comes into your organization in an unstructured format, you need to cut it up and put it in the correct database format for use. Cloud storage, and indeed anywhere you put the data, is certainly a part of this. A key insight is around platforms, which are frameworks used to crunch large amounts of data more quickly. Here, a key insight is to break the data up into chunks, which can be analyzed in parallel so that the data can be considered and acted upon more quickly. Another technique is to build a pipeline of processing steps, each optimized for a particular task. Another important component is machine learning and its importance in the data supply chain. We're trying to find signals within the noise to discern patterns. Humans can't find signals well by themselves, just as astronomers use algorithms to scan the night sky for signals, then verify any promising anomalies themselves. So too can data analysis use machines to find interesting dimensions, groupings, or patterns within the data. Machines work at a lower signal-to-noise ratio than people, and here you might consider the visualization of patterns in raked leaves that Patrick Taylor from the Oversight Systems talked about. It is important in machine learning as big data collection and analysis, but there's no substitution for human eyes and human ears. For many business leaders, displaying the data is most difficult because it is not generally in a readable form. It is important to portray the data in a more visual style and help to convey the dozens of independent data sources into navigable 3D environments. And here you can think of my conversations with Joe Orangel from Visual Risk IQ. Of course, having all the data is of zero use unless you act on it, and certainly Wei Chin echoed that when she was the compliance counsel at the Department of Justice. Big data can be used in a wide variety of decision-making, from employment decisions around hiring and firing, to strategic planning, to risk management, and to compliance programs. But it takes a shift in compliance thinking to use such data. It requires fast, iterative learning. Big data allows you to make a quicker assessment of the impact of measured risks. Big data supply chain is the organizational OODA loop. But unlike the OODA loop, it is simply more than about the loop itself and plugging information as you move through it. Big data is mostly about feedback, that is, obtaining the impacts of the risks you have accepted. For this to work in compliance, a company's compliance discipline needs to both understand and choose a course of action based upon the results, then observe what happens and use that information to collect new data or analyze things in a different way. It's a process of continuous innovation. Whether you consider the OODA loop or the big data supply chain feedback, this process, coupled with the data that is available to you, should facilitate a more agile and directed compliance function. The feedback components in both allow you to make adjustments literally on the fly. And frankly, if that doesn't meet the definition of innovation, I do not know what does. So what are today's 3 key takeaways? Well, first of all, it's around innovation itself. Certainly with innovation, you're only restricted by your own imagination, but innovation can come through a new way to think about information that you already have or use data going forward. And that's certainly what the OODA feedback loop gives you. Once again, I have to say I love saying that word, OODA, but it stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. So observe your compliance program, orient where it is in space and geography, decide what you want to do with the information that you've garnered from the first 2 steps, and then act. And number 3, as Gary Kasparov noted in his recent book, always remember with machine learning and analysis, there is no substitute for human eyes and human ears. Please do not think that I'm advocating big data take the role of the compliance practitioner or the compliance professional. It augments augments that role. But that's where the compliance practitioner needs to analyze that data and then loop it back into your compliance program so that you have a continuous feedback of usable data. This is Tom Fox. I hope you've enjoyed day 11 of 1 month of innovation in compliance, and I hope you'll join me tomorrow for day 12. This is Tom Fox again. I'd like to thank you again for listening to this episode of 1 month to more effective innovation in compliance. If you have listened to this podcast on iTunes, I hope that you would rate our podcast, as would help in our rankings and help get the word out about the only monthly podcast series in compliance, which will help you create a better compliance program. Also, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. This is Tom Fox. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I hope you'll join me again tomorrow.